Hello, everyone. It's John Laughland here. I'm the director of Forum for Democracy International. Welcome to this week's forum. We've taken a 2-week break, and before the break, I invited Stanislav Krapivnik to join us today. 2 weeks ago, the news was full of how Ukraine was turning the tide. There were pictures of refineries going up in flames, of wild berry stores exploding, killing dozens of civilians and creating a lot of smoke. And shortly before the break, or perhaps even during it, I can't remember now, Stanislav was kind enough to invite me on his own show, In the Eyes of Truth. And Stanislav has, of course, been on our show several times. And Stanislav, you often question me about things like Britain and the European Union and stuff like that. But we often, even on your show, we often end up talking about the Russia-Ukraine war, and you're a very impressive expert on that. Your view is that on the ground, Russia is continuing to win. This is a view that I know from other commentators as well. But surely, Stanislav, the fact that Ukrainian drones can get so deep inside Russia, well, I say Ukrainian drones, Western European drones fired from Ukraine, can get deep inside Russia and inflict significant damage on civilian infrastructure. Surely that is a big negative for Russia. Stanislav.
Well, I can't say it's not a negative. Obviously, it does do damage. The fuel crisis, as was, never really materialized. There were difficulties about 2.5 months ago. Occasionally, there's some shortages still, partially because they're also targeting, particularly in the closer to Ukraine, they're targeting actual fuel trucks, killing the drivers, blowing up the trucks when they can. The steps that Russia has taken, the counter steps, first of all, you need to consider how many of these drones are being launched, the amount of resources that are going into manufacturing of these drones. It's the drones are going deep in are 4 meters long. They're 3 to 4 meters long. Basically small Cessna planes flying in. And they're quite literally going in the hundreds every day. So that's a small engine that has to be produced for each. Explosive charge, the whole kit. So they're not a tiny investment. Out of these drones, less than 0.5% actually more or less reach targets. So they're really the payback is relatively small. Most of the hits are falling into one of 3 categories. When it comes to fuel, when it comes to refineries, what they're hitting and they continue to hit is mostly the fuel storage facilities, the big storage barrels, if you want to call them that, at the end of one of these facilities. They're either holding raw oil or they're holding finished products. Now, nobody puts those out. You cut off the flow in and out, and you just let them burn out and then replace them. They're relatively low tech. You're talking about a vessel, a large vessel with an inner lining in it, a steel vessel that can be relatively easily replaced. Hitting the actual facilities, the actual refineries. Now, Iran has done massive damage to refineries, but they're throwing ballistic missiles with 1-ton warheads on them. These deep in strikes, you're looking at 100 kilos or less of explosives.
You're talking about the Iranian attacks You're talking about the Iranian attacks on refineries and oil installations in the Gulf, on the south side of the Gulf.
Right. You're looking at very large warheads coming in, and multiple warheads. When you're looking at these refineries deep in Russia, the warheads on these drones, these airplane drones, are actually pretty small, because the majority of the airplane drones taken up by fuel to get it to its target, which is 3,000, 4,000 kilometers in. So obviously, most of it's going to fuel. And they make a relatively small pop. If they hit one of these oil storage tanks or product storage tanks, it'll explode. It'll burn. Obviously, it's packed full of fuel. If they strike any of the piping is under computerized valve pressure control. Valves get cut off, but a computer, you don't have any flames, and they're relatively easy to replace, all things considered, with the piping. And most of the vessels are 1 to 3 meters long, so they may take a day to weld a new one together. and get it in. So maybe a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, refineries down, then it's back up and running again. So we saw this last year when the official, everybody was touting, the Ukrainians were touting 40% destruction of Russian refining capacity. And then Reuters came out very quietly at the beginning of September and said, shh, it's actually only 3%. And Russia's official target, official numbers are 1.5%. So maybe somewhere in between 2.5%. Significant hit. This year, maybe more, but again, not a significant hit. This year, they've done more damage in murdering truck drivers and hitting civilian fuel trucks, delivering fuel to fuel stations. So that's probably done more damage, honestly, going into terror attacks like that. The other thing that they were striking wild berries. Wild berries still works. There's a bit of a delay. What wild berries did, outside of the fact that they murdered a lot of people working in these mega centers, is wild berries returned to its previous model. Wild berries was there long before the mega warehouse and distribution centers showed up. And wild berries went back to a dispersed small warehouse model that it operated from originally. So they've got lots of small warehouses, and they're just using those small warehouses. It's not as efficient, but
hang on, Stanislav. Quite a few large ones have been hit, and they blew up, at least to judge by the videos and pictures we saw, in a very impressive way. Why did they burn so phenomenally? If you say that these drones had relatively low payloads, how come they went up like a bomb?
Well, because it doesn't take much to put up a warehouse in the flames. If the flame starts internally, they have fire suppression systems, but we've seen those go off, not work correctly. There was a paper warehouse, a modern giant warehouse that one of the workers set on fire in the U.S. And he set up, he lit enough fires inside that the water suppression system couldn't put it all out. They're good for small flames. One of these drones that hits that's packed with airplane fuel or diesel, depending what the engines run, or gasoline with them, and depending what the engines run, it probably wouldn't be diesel, it'd probably be gasoline or aviation fuel. It's highly flammable. It's usually the fire is already big enough that the suppression system isn't designed for something like that. And then when you consider that most of the goods inside are highly flammable, plastics, various other materials, paper, they burn really well. So yes, they do burn.
Yeah.
I mean, they're a huge target for obvious reasons. Now, Russia has retaliated by taking out Nova Pochta. The difference is Nova Pochta actually does serve the Ukrainian military, and they've advertised it. They've bragged online. Where
Nova
it's not
Pochta
that they
is
deliver
what? It's a Ukrainian Amazon, is it?
Yeah. But it's been working with the Ukrainian military to help deliver equipment. It's one thing where the family buys their son some high-tech flak vest, bulletproof vest, and they send it to him. It's another thing when Nova Pochta delivers a couple hundred of them on one truck, and they're stupid enough that they put all this out on the internet. Look, hey, we're helping the Ukrainian war effort. Yeah, here's our latest truck full of flak vests or helmets or what have you. So they've become inadvertently themselves an obvious target as part of the military complex in Ukraine, the NATO Ukrainian military complex. And their warehouses are burning left and right, but nobody talks about that because the Western media doesn't want to talk about that.
Exactly. So
you're saying
you're saying that these similar big warehouses have also been hit. What did the Russians use to hit them? Did they use drones? Did they use ballistic missiles? What did they use, and how many have they hit?
They effectively Nova Pochta is out of business in eastern Ukraine. Any medium and large warehouse has been hit. Drones, grand drones. Look, the Ukrainians are out of anti-aircraft systems. They could never really hit. The American PAC-3s are pretty worthless against ballistic missiles. They're good at helicopters and airplanes, but they were absolutely worthless against ballistic missiles. The hit rate that Professor Postal's research showed, the hit rate of a PAC-3 missile, which is designed to take out ballistic missiles, on a ballistic missile is about 5 to 6%. Let's put this into dollar value. So you have a 1 in 20 chance of hitting. So you need 20 missiles to hit one. At $5
Yeah,
million
yeah,
a piece, that's $100 million to hit a ballistic missile worth maybe $400,000. That's how you
yeah, yeah,
bankrupt
yeah.
yourself very, very quickly. Never
Yeah, well,
mind, the
you made that
Americans
point.
simply
You
cannot
made that
produce
point to
these
me
in
when
mass.
you made that point to me when we last spoke, I think, on your show about the cost of shooting down
Mhm.
a drone. It's I don't know, a few $100s or something to shoot down a $50,000 drone or whatever.
Yeah, that's because these drones are also, this is a step that Russia has taken. These drones are also very susceptible to machine gun fire. You don't need missiles necessarily to take them out. A lot of them get taken out by short range missiles, but when they start coming in for their final arc or coming on target, they're usually taken out by machine gun fire.
Yeah,
What does that mean? Russia is using Patriot trucks, Patriot pickup trucks, and they're turning them into technicals, which means they put a gun mount on the back of it in the bed and put a light machine gun on there. So it's a two-man team on each of these, and they do very good work on the drones. In Donbass, because there's not as many pickup trucks in the area, they've turned every hatchback they can get their hands on into a technical. They take out the hatchback and they weld a gun mount in the back, and there's a guy that's on the machine gun, and they're doing escorts for trucks, for military trucks. The Mariupol Rostov interstate that Teal's drones were murdering civilians left and right on because they're made by Palantir drones, the Hornets, programmed by and made by Palantir. When they finally deployed a battalion, anti-aircraft battalion in there with gun trucks, the last count, which was about 2 weeks ago, was 1,400 drones downed in that area. So that has opened the interstate back up. So there's the low tech solution to a low price but high tech problem.
yeah,
These drones, even the Palantir drones, even if they cost $30,000, but $20 worth of 7.62 or $50 worth of 7.62 rounds, take them out, you're losing a lot of money. Even if it's
yeah,
$100 worth of rounds, you're still losing a lot of
yeah.
money.
But okay, so if you say, if as you say, wild berries have managed immediately to go back to their earlier modus operandi and move to much smaller warehouses or whatever, what will the Ukrainians hit next?
Well, the Ukrainians are hitting what they've been hitting before, civilians. On average, there are between 10 and 30 civilians murdered by the Ukrainians every single day. That's occasionally that's in one or two strikes. Most of the time, it's spread through multiple strikes. They've the problem getting to any military posts or any of these refineries or industrial targets, they're becoming more and more hardened. You got gun trucks, you got nettings, you got other things. You've got Panzer anti-aircraft systems, which carry short-range missiles and autocannons and do very good work on these drones. What's easy to hit? Apartment buildings, single residency housing. And that's what we've been seeing more and more. Resorts, like in Zaporozhye. People on the beach, like in Gelendzhik. Murdering children. That's a lot easier. It's bad enough you have the terrorist Thiel and his terrorist company Palantir that are murdering civilians, because those drones that he uses, the Hornet drones, when they get down to about 20% of their charge, they're no longer looking for something that looks like a military target. They're looking for anything that's moving. 2 months ago,
Yeah,
they
but I
took
mean,
out an 11 and 12-year-old boy on a bicycle at that
yeah,
level.
sure, but I mean the attacks on the refineries, the attacks on the warehouses, those were designed surely to produce spectacular images, which they did. Moscow suburbs on fire, that kind of thing. By the way, I was in St. Petersburg in June and saw the smoke from one of the attacks on one of the early attacks actually on the refineries. So my question is, these attacks on these soft targets are designed, we assume, for propaganda purposes, to show that, or to pretend to show that Russia is vulnerable and so on. So will there be, what do you anticipate will be the next stage? I mean, killing civilians on a beach is not very useful in propaganda terms, to put it rather cynically. I'm wondering what their next trick will be, if indeed it is a trick.
Well, Russia's shown that it can escalate, counter-escalate in
Yeah,
quite a bit. We've seen that in the Black Sea. They start attacking shipping in the Black
yeah,
Sea. Russia countered by destroying everything moving in and out of the 7 Ukrainian ports and destroying the ports. Now, by the way, one of their little tricks from that we can thank the West for, and I'm being very cynical when I say that, is the famine that's coming to Africa, because
Africa.
the grain that's coming out of the
Sure.
Black Sea is the Ukrainian grain is mostly going to Western Europe. There's going to be a famine there too. Europe is facing famine conditions. Whether or not they're talking about it is a different issue. But the Russian grain was mostly going to Egypt. It was going to Syria. It was going to sub-Saharan Africa. And right now, nothing's going out of the Black Sea because the Ukrainian drones are attacking. And they've attacked quite a few non-Russian ships. They've struck multiple Turkish ships, even though Erdogan continues to play that down and play the puppet or the wannabe solvent for Ukraine. They've hit Azerbaijani ships. Aliyev does the same, even as his own public is enraged when they had to bury 5 sailors that were murdered by Ukraine. But life goes on in those Turkic dictatorships. The point here is Africa is going to suffer. There's going to be a lot of people are going to suffer because of grain shortages, fertilizer shortages, thanks to the American war in Iran, diesel shortages, thanks to the American war in Iran. Europe, because of the heat wave and the drought and the shortage in fertilizer. Fertilizers went up threefold in price. The report I saw, Europe could be facing up to a 40% drop in harvests. That's starvation for the lower classes. That's skyrocketing food prices. The grain out of Ukraine is not going to make it to Europe. By the rail has been the rail is not an option either, because not so much that the rail itself is being attacked. That's a very temporary strike that's easily repaired. But because Russia is now going actively to take out all the locomotives. And not just Russian aviation, not just Russian missiles, but Russian partisans from the Russian population living in central Ukraine are also been very active in destroying trains, something that nobody really wants to talk about in the West.
Okay, I'm very interested in that. I'm very interested in that. Can we develop that point? But before we do, I just want to ask you, please, because that really is a very interesting point. But can I ask you also about the taking out of the ports? I've heard this. We've all heard this. We're told Odessa no longer functions as a port. Nothing can go out of it. No grain or whatever. Can you please explain very simply why? What has Russia done? Has it just literally destroyed the loading facilities, the port? What?
Russia hit Odessa several times before, but these were one-off strikes, kind of a warning strike. You remember, we used to have a grain deal. What happened with the grain deal is a lot of heavy weapon systems were brought into Odessa on these ships that went to load up on grain, and B, the Ukrainians or the NATO were launching drone attacks from these ships as they were leaving the ports down this green corridor. They were dropping drones in the waters halfway and then attacking the Russian Navy from different directions. So Russia closed the grain deal, and it didn't really benefit from the beginning, but it did as a negotiation tactic. Here we'll give you a step forward, and that turned sour. This time, Russia didn't start really striking those ports until the Ukrainian / American, as we know from Marco Rubio and Trump, who in a press conference said, yes, we're doing deep strikes on Russia to 40 days of destruction to bring Russia to its knees, which is ludicrous PR idiocy. But that's what they launched. Well, the first wave of that 40 days was strikes in the Azov Sea and the eastern Black Sea, which, by the way, were also strikes against American interests, interestingly enough, because the Caspian Pipeline Authority, they run through Novorossiysk. That's Kazakh oil from Tengiz, and that's 50% owned by Chevron. So when Greek, when Turkish, when other ships have been hit coming in to fill up, the facilities have been hit in Novorossiysk, and even their offices have been hit in Novorossiysk. At this point, Kazakhstan's lost about $4.5 billion, and Chevron has lost about $5 billion from this. So they can thank their masters in Washington and their proxies in Ukraine for that, because those are direct strikes on their infrastructure. Well, there's going to be major issues again. When all this started up, Russia's response was to counter-escalate. And Russia has systematically now destroyed the 7 ports in Ukraine. There's Port Yuzhny, which is north of Odessa. There's Odessa itself. There's 5 other ports, 3 of whom are located on the Danube River. They have been systematically hit and systematically destroyed. Plus, all the ships going in and out have been struck. So at this point, we've got Maersk that's already said that there's no way in hell any of our ships are going in there. It's too dangerous. They're the biggest hauler in the world. Lloyd's of London is not insuring anything coming in and out for obvious reasons. So that's basically closed the ports down. And minus rail, you're looking at only by truck, only a capability of moving about 6% of the grain and sunflower oil that's produced to Europe. That means lack of cooking oil. That means lack of bread,
Sure.
and so on.
But so you're saying, and obviously we've known this from other sources, that the ports have now been neutralized. The Ukrainian ports on the Black Sea can't be used anymore. What about the rail connections? Or in other words, how is weaponry continuing to arrive in Ukraine from the West? And why does Russia not destroy those lines of communication?
Well, the rails in and around Odessa are being destroyed, active, the actual rail system. But damaging the rail system, again, it's a very short-term solution, because you put a hole into the rail, I come over with an excavator, I fill that hole in, I put down new rails, and we're running maybe 2 days of repairs. It's the same thing as hitting airstrips in an airport or an air base.
Yeah.
Okay, we bring the excavator, we pack it back down, and then maybe asphalt it over, and off we go flying again. So that's a short-term solution. That's why, as I was saying, Russia is now going after locomotives, actively going after locomotives. I've got several videos where Russian partisans in Ukraine, in central Ukraine, so these are local people, are burning locomotives. And that becomes the problem, because previously, the way Ukraine brought in equipment on locomotives is to use civilians as human shields, knowing that the Russians won't hit because they're trying to avoid civilian casualties. So you'd have a train car of civilians, a flatbed carrying artillery pieces or tanks, and another train and another passenger car after that. So even if Russia only destroys the flatbed, the last passenger car is still going to derail, and there's going to be casualties. So they're using their own population as human shields. Well, Russia set that itself up as that weakness, that we're going to play by humanitarian rules, and Ukraine is more than willing to play by using people as human shields and expendable material, because the leadership in Ukraine works that way. They're not Ukrainians. I mean, if you look at it, if we're going to talk ethnically, they're not Ukrainians, most of the leadership. And they're not planning of dying of old age in Ukraine. This is a feeding place for them. Their families are already overseas, and they're going to join them as soon as it gets too hot. I mean, that's the truth of it. I mean, it's the obvious elephant in the room that nobody seems to want to address.
Yeah.
Who actually runs the country?
Yeah.
As far as partisans, there was an interesting point a friend of mine in intelligence made. It's not just Russian partisans working in Ukraine. There are now ultranationalist partisans working in Ukraine, Western Ukraine.
Ultranationalist Ukrainian partisans.
Yes, that are working with the Russian partisans.
How does that work?
Well, it's a matter of survival, because a lot of these ultranationalist groups have figured out that Zelensky is going to fight him to the last Ukrainian child if he gets a chance to. And if they want to survive, they need to somehow get rid of the Zelensky regime and the military that backs it. So they've started working with the Russian, because they need somebody to destroy facilities to undermine the regime. So they start working with the Russian partisans to pass on information to the Russian military on strike locations, because this is their way of trying to get rid of Zelensky, who's going to use them up to the last human being. And it took them a while to figure that out, but they finally started figuring that out.
Yeah, but surely, Stanislav, those people must be a very small minority among the Ukrainian nationalist groups, because we've seen with the reburial of Konovalets that this renamed Azov Brigade, the third corpus or whatever it's called, they seem to be still significant within the Ukrainian armed forces. You're saying that there are splinter groups against the main Azov galaxy who are fighting, who are essentially, from the Ukrainian point of view, traitors, fighting with the Russians against Zelensky.
There are, and it gets more complicated than that. There are splinter groups inside the ultra-nationalists that are willing to fight. What's his name? Kosovsky was just removed from one of his positions, and he has started a new splinter group, because they're also fighting over resources. Even the ones that are, quote, willing to fight are fighting over resources, who gets to command what, because that's how you earn money, by siphoning off the funds that go to these different organizations. So there's also an internal graft fight for power or for money inside the ultra-nationalists. It all comes down to money one way or the other, oftentimes. So yeah, it's a very complicated situation. There's nothing black and white about it. Plus, there's quite a few of these ultra-nationalists that are now extreme ultra-nationalists living in America, Canada, England, and other places as far away from the Ukrainian front. As a matter of fact, that's something about Ukrainian nationalism. The further one is from the front, the greater the nationalism grows. I've got several people that used to be friends of mine that became ultra-Ukrainian nationalists living in America. And this was before the fighting started. And my question is, if you're such a nationalist, why don't you move back to Ukraine? I moved back to Russia. I love the country. I moved back to Russia. It's my homeland. Oh, well, yeah, I do more here. Some other excuse. Well, if you love a country so much, why are you living on the other side of the world from it?
And tell us about these Russian
asking for a friend.
Then. Tell us about the Russian partisans, because you've talked about these Ukrainian nationalist splinter groups. But how does this is something that I have never heard, and it's absolutely fascinating. It's really good new information. The idea that Russia is waging a behind the lines partisan war, much as, by the way, the Red Army did in World War II. That's fascinating. What's the extent of this, Stanislav?
Well, there's a difference. Much of the partisan movement in World War II, in the Great Patriotic War, was founded on Soviet soldiers that just went into the woods. Right? They were surrounded, their units were destroyed, and they scattered into the woods, then reorganized, and then started fighting the Germans that way, and then started attracting some of the locals. In this case, these are the locals. These aren't former Russian soldiers. These are locals that you got to remember. Central Ukraine is Russian. Basically, if you take a line from Kiev and you run it straight down to Odessa, all of that land east of that line of Kiev Oblast is Russian, ethnically, linguistically Russian. They've been suppressed. As a matter of fact,
well, by the way, I personally, my personal experience is that even the west of Ukraine is Russian speaking. I've got various pieces of personal direct experience to indicate that. I haven't been to Western Ukraine, but I've met people from there, and I've been in, for instance, some time ago now, but I've been in the Catholic Cathedral in the Western Rite Catholic Cathedral, not the Uniate, the Western Rite Catholic Cathedral in Kiev. It's admittedly 25 years ago, but everyone, as people left mass there, they were all speaking Russian. So people from Western Ukraine, from the former Polish parts of Ukraine, we've had in Paris, we've had a couple of cleaning ladies from Lvov and from Ivano-Frankivsk. The one who came from Ivano-Frankivsk was, in fact, from a village, not even from the town, and she she, like the other one, both of them spoke absolutely perfect Russian. So I think that your point about the language goes probably even further west than the line you've described. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah,
It's true that that
absolutely.
region, what is true is that that western region, historically, certainly Galicia, just for our viewers, has not been part of the Russian Empire, or the Soviet Union was not part of it until 1945. So it spent many, many centuries under Polish and Austrian rule. That is correct. But even there, even in those regions, and these cleaning ladies I'm talking about, they're in their 30s. It's not because they grew up in the Soviet Union. They naturally spoke Russian. Anyway, sorry to interrupt. Go ahead, Stanislav.
No. Go. You're absolutely correct. Those areas, they're now calling them Ruthenians or Karpata Rus. I've known several families of Karpata Rus. They used to go to our church when I was living in the city of Raleigh. And you want a red button that'll get you in a fist fight with them instantly. You tell them they're not Russians. We were having a festival, and the guys were walking by. I mean, they're just beat red, angry. I'm like, what happened? They're like, some Muscovite, because there was a new family moved in. They said that we're not Russians, and they were ready to throw down. But it was a church festival, so they maintained their composure.
You're saying that
Ruthenians.
You're saying that Ruthenians in Western Ukraine want to be regarded as Russians.
Yes, absolutely, and they're not just located in Western Ukraine. They're located up and down that eastern portion of the Carpathian Mountains. In fact, that's where the Austro-Hungarian Empire set up 2 concentration camps back in the 1880s and started creating Ukrainians. Like they rewrote the history in Chornogoria or Montenegro and made Serbs that aren't quite Serbs. They did these areas because they were afraid of the Karpata Rus were going to break away and join the Russian Empire. Their brothers are right across the border. And the Austro-Hungarian Empire, as we know, had a lot of different nationalities in it, and it was almost over 50% Slavic. So they had a lot of issues with that. So these areas, there's a lot of anti-Zelensky, anti-Kiev sentiment. Of course, you can't say that very loud because that's a good way to get yourself shot. People are disappeared by the SBU constantly. So they're all partisans acting. And there's been, from what I've been told and what I've seen, there's been 3 full trains of NATO equipment that have been derailed and burnt in Odessa province alone over the last 4 years. So there's active partisans. They're not as big formation as what you might have had in World War II. But then again, try to have a big formation when you have drones flying all over the place. So they're more like cells these days instead of like, in World War II, some of these partisan outfits got to be the size of several divisions.
Sure.
You have 20, 30,000.
No, I know. It's very big.
2 divisions worth. Now you have 2, 3, 4-man groups because drone warfare makes life very, very difficult. But they are.
But again, I come back to that's fascinating, and I'm very glad that you've told us that. And I think you've said this on other podcasts, but I'm hearing this for the first time personally, and it's very, very important piece of information. But I come back to the issue of weapons deliveries to Ukraine. I mean, my understanding is that Ukraine, for the last 4.5 years, has been entirely, or certainly very largely, dependent on arms shipments from the West. Why is it that Russia cannot prevent those shipments?
Cannot or did not want to. Well, I mean, there are several issues here. Right now, it is preventing a large chunk of the shipments because the ports of Odessa have been 7 ports have been destroyed or heavily damaged. So that and the shipping is being hit. That took that took a political decision, and a serious political decision to go down that route. It's now heavily focusing on destroying railroads. I'm sorry, locomotives on the railroads. Again, that was more difficult because when Ukraine had anti-aircraft systems, and the way it had a lot of Soviet-era anti-aircraft systems that actually worked pretty well, that limited capacity to strike deeper inside Ukraine against locomotive targets. Right now, Russia has a much freer hand because of a lack of air defense systems or lack of ammunition for the air defense systems. Uh, it could have done more. Again, that's not my decision. I would have done more, but why the bridges on the Dnieper are still up, I have no idea. As a military man, I can tell you on a theater level or above scale, the first things you go after is logistics. You go after
Yeah.
supply chain and you go after logistics.
Yeah.
Supply chain is beyond the boundary, the border, so that would be a bigger war, but the logistics isn't. The other thing is they're also shipping a lot of equipment in civilian cars, so that becomes another issue. There was I've seen photographs of how they were shipping Storm Shadow missiles in. Apparently, a Storm
Yeah.
Shadow missile fits in a Porsche Cayenne between the dashboard and the back hatchback. It fits,
Wow.
with just a little bit of room to spare. And they were
Wow.
driving them in that way. They also do it on civilian trucks. A BMP fits into a civilian truck. Granted, heavier equipment doesn't, but there's a lot of things you can drive in civilian trucks, hiding as groceries or anything like that.
Sure.
So unless you're going to start really going after everything that moves,
Yeah.
how far can you take this? Well,
Yeah.
when you're willing to use your own people as human shields and break every rule of war, including, by the way, the Ukrainians use ambulances to deliver troops to forward
Yeah.
areas.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's they've every Geneva Convention rule of war has been I won't say it's been broken, it's been destroyed, totally
Hmm.
destroyed.
Well, no doubt. But again, I'm surprised that you say that so you've said it. The armament, the delivery of arms has come through the ports, including, of course, civilian ships, and now you're saying it comes in through lorries, ordinary trucks. I mean, I think, yeah, that's
Yes,
plausible.
absolutely.
Obviously, there are lots of trucks, and presumably you can get quite a lot of stuff into trucks if you have enough of them. Okay, so that's that. But yeah, okay, fair enough. I mean, that's. But I mean, that is
The thing about lorries is
surely a problem. Surely that's a
mhm,
problem because so long as these weapons continue to arrive, the war continues.
of course it is. Lorries are a problem, of course. Lorries are limited because they can't carry as much at a time as a ship obviously could.
Yeah.
So that is a limiting factor. The other thing that's a limiting factor is the fact that the West, well, outside of America, the Europeans cannot produce artillery in any of the rates they need, and we go back to States. Uh, Europe, non-Russian Europe, the European Union, better yet, is out of gas. It takes a lot of gas to heat the metal. Used to use coal, but they're out of coal too. They're out of steel. Particularly, Ukraine was one of the main supply points for iron to manufacture steel, and they're having issues with gun cotton. Gun cotton is very high quality cotton that's soaked in liquefied gunpowder, and it becomes a much higher rate of explosive, a higher velocity. That's what's used in artillery shells a lot. The problem is who grows most of the cotton in the world? Well, cotton that for the Europeans mostly comes from China.
Yeah.
And that high quality cotton is also used, by the way, by the clothing industry. Uh, Cotton manufacturers, they grow the cotton a year and ahead from the previous year's orders. So place the orders now, get the cotton in the spring or early summer. China has also put at least some amount of controls on selling cotton to the Europeans that can be used in dual purpose manufacturing, aka artillery rounds, other high explosives. So that becomes a big problem. The Americans grow enough cotton for themselves. Russia has the Orthodox Church teaches that God sends you your enemies to get you to do things you should have been doing anyways. So Russia got its cotton from Uzbekistan and Tajikistan because it's hot enough down there for it to grow.
Yeah.
In 2016, the Americans started pushing hard on those countries to stop selling Russia cotton. or gun cotton, thinking they were going to handicap the Russian supply chain.
Yeah.
Well, here's the problem with Russians. A lot of Western propaganda may think we're smart apes, but we're smart. We're just not apes. And we're a lot smarter than apes than the average bear. Russian scientists worked out how to use flex, and Russia grows more flex than anybody else in the world. It grows incredible amounts of it, and it's cheaper than the high quality cotton.
Yeah.
So Russia now uses flex, and it has an unlimited supply of it for all intents and purposes. So now it no longer has a problem with gun cotton. Now, if the Americans had done this in 2022 instead of 2026, instead of 2016, that would have been a big problem. Thankfully,
Yeah.
they jumped the gun and they did it early on. So by that point, the Russian industry had adopted new technologies and had moved over to a new supply base.
Yeah.
Basically, an endless
Okay.
supply base.
Okay. So you've given Stanislav a very complete account of the reality on the ground, on the weaknesses of the Ukrainian side, on the Russian victories, and you've been doing this now for some time, and it's completely convincing and absolutely fascinating to listen to. So what next? What next?
Well, I was speaking with Commodore Steve Jeremy today,
Yeah.
and we were talking about the issues on talks. Tier 2 talks might be a way for things to work out, because the problem is on the tier 1 level, nobody trusts anybody in Europe. The only two trustworthy, well, one very trustworthy, second one we'll see, is Fico and Babic. The heads of Slovakia and Czech Republic. Orban was somebody
Fico,
that could be trusted, but Orban was sidelined. But the problem with Fico and Babic is they're minor players.
Yeah.
I mean, let's be realistic. They have their heads on correctly. They understand what they need to do. The Bulgarians may be another one, but again, they're all minor players. The big players in the European Union, none of these people are going to be trusted. Nobody trusts them anymore. Especially after Merkel and Hollande ran to the media and bragged about how Minsk 1 and Minsk 2 was all just meant to prepare for war with Russia, not just the Donbass, but with Russia. And so on. There's no trust, and how can you do negotiations on anything with no trust when you absolutely cannot trust the other side? So going forward, I think the decision has finally been taken on doing this on the battlefield. Where does battlefield ends? That's a big question. That it's not going to end at the Donbass, that's obvious enough. And the rhetoric that's now used shows it too, because anytime a town in Kharkov or Sumy or settlement in Kharkov or Sumy or Poltava Poltava hasn't really started yet, but Dnipropetrovsk is taken. It's now listed as liberated, and that's the reality is those territories that are being taken, they're not going to be given up. The Donbass is almost done. Russia is by law required to take back all of Kherson and Zaporozhye region by constitution. As far as Kharkov and Sumy, if this continues for another 2-3 months, much of Kharkov and Sumy is going to be in Russian hands. Sumy, more likely, first of all, and large parts of Kharkov Oblast are already in Russian hands, and that's just accelerating. So
but sorry, Stanislav,
where we go from there?
We've been expecting Russia to not just conquer the Donbass, but also to move on, as you say, onto the remaining parts of the other oblasts, and also Odessa and so on, which Russia doesn't even claim yet formally. We've been waiting for this for about 2 years, and surely the fact is that Russia is struggling to control even Donetsk.
Well, I wouldn't say control. I wouldn't. The areas that they have are fully under control.
No, but I mean to control, to liberate the rest of it. If you want to use the word liberate, to conquer the rest of it.
Well, if you're taking about taking it, well, first of all, the war of attrition is never meant as a run across territory. If to be believed, The hack on the Ministry of Defense in Ukraine from 2 months ago that pulled out data tables and Excel spreadsheets was showing 2.4 million dead and missing.
On the Ukrainian side. On the Ukrainian side. Yeah, of
on
course.
The Ukrainian side.
Yeah.
2.4 million. And you could count in another 1.5 million invalids. So about 4 million men at this point. This is
but I'm asking you about this because you said you started to talk about territory. You started to talk about Kharkov and Sumy and so on. So I'm coming back to you and saying, but they still haven't conquered the whole of Donetsk Oblast.
True, but if you look at the way things are developing, the acceleration is hard to miss. Sumy is a logistical target because it's a key hub, logistical hub. Russian forces are about 5 kilometers out and from the north and northeast, and there's more coming in. They're about 20 kilometers out and moving westward. Kharkov, northeastern Kharkov Oblast is in 2 encirclements. And the Ukrainian forces trapped inside. The first one, they're done. They've got less than 10 kilometers between the 2 Russian pincer movements. So that northeastern edge is basically already taken. And they're moving that way up to the Severna Donetsk River, and from Kupiansk too. So they're coming in from at Kharkov from two major directions. And once Sumy's cut, it'll be 3 directions. The 3 cities that are left, the 3 cities, Druzhinka, Kramatorsk, and Slavinsk. There's Russian movements in the north that are starting to push in. There's from Kupiansk, there's a big pincer movement, and there is already fighting, some light fighting in the outskirts of Druzhinka. They've taken the towns before it. And there's Russian movement that's about 5 kilometers away from Kramatorsk, Druzhinka, and Slavinsk as a head-on. But there's also a movement further west from the town of Dobropolye. So Dobropolye is about 20% taken. And there's a big spike that's been moving very rapidly that's broken through the Ukrainian defense lines behind Druzhinka and Kramatorsk. So they're cutting them off from behind. And the problem for the Ukrainian soldiers in that area is there's nowhere to fall back to. There's open fields, small villages, no fortified lines. That's it. They're out of fortified lines. Previously, they've always been able to fall back to the next town, 3-4 kilometers, next town, 3-4. Everything's been fortified and prepared. This is the end of the line. This is the last line. If you look at Oryokov is almost a third taken. Russian troops broke through in the south, and they went hard into Oryokov. The Ukrainians are throwing everything they have in reserves right now to try to stop the Russian forces from fully encircling Oryokov. Oryokov is gone, and will be gone probably within the next 2 to 3 weeks. That opens up a full way to Zaporozhye city. There's only, again, open fields, small towns, unprepared lines until you get to Zaporozhye itself. So the Ukrainians...
Zaporozhye city being on the west side of the Dnieper River.
Yes. No. Zaporozhye city is on the east side of the Dnieper
it's on
River.
The east side, okay.
Kherson is on the west side, yeah.
Yeah.
Zaporozhye, and Russia is now hitting the 3 bridges from Zaporozhye city to the rest of Ukraine. They hit one of those bridges pretty hard yesterday, but it's still functional, but it's been heavily damaged, limited functional. So there's movements now to cut off Zaporozhye from the east. It's going to be cut off from south, and movement to cut it off from the west with the bridges. So there's movement, and it's accelerating because the Ukrainians are thin, barely holding on. They've been thinned out over these last 4 years, and there was even an admission from one of the members of parliament that they want the assault units packed between 40 and 60% by foreigners.
Yeah.
The problem is that those Cuban mercenaries don't come in there to die for Ukraine. They come in there to make money. So they're pretty shocked when they wind up getting shot for Ukraine, pushed up front. So there's been a lot of there's been a lot of problems with the Cuban mercenaries that didn't quite read the fine print when they signed their contracts. So Ukraine is got a lot of problems. So NATO, could NATO make a stupid move? Absolutely. But NATO is going to come up with that point of decision. Do we do something smart in open talks, or do we do something stupid and escalate?
So that
very,
brings me
very
back
soon.
to that brings us back to the point where I interrupted you a few moments ago. You were talking about tier 2 talks.
Yeah, we were talking about tier 2 talks. I think something on that level could happen. The English could push something on the level of CEOs, political experts, things like that, to start some kind of level of conversation between
The
equals on the other
English, the
side.
British.
Uh, the British, yes, we were
Is
talking
that
about
what
the
Steve
British
Jermy says?
on the level. Yes, yes,
So Steve
as a
Jermy says
possibility.
that
I'm not saying,
the British might be putting out feelers to the Russians.
yeah, but on a much lower level. Yes. So
Wow.
there's that as a possibility, because I think somebody well, Farage has a good chance of resetting some amount of relations if he doesn't screw it up. But the official faces in power right now, nobody trusts them. There's absolutely no trust. The trust has
Well,
been
we'll have to
burned. The
get
bridges
Steve
have been
Jermy
burned.
on
So,
the forum again soon to ask him about that, because that, again, it's a bit like what you were saying about the partisans. I've never heard that before, that from Britain, of all places, there would be feelers. I could imagine feelers on a tier 2 level going out from Germany or France or Italy or whatever. But from Britain, that really
can you hear me?
is astonishing. I hear you, Stanislav. Go ahead.
Yeah, like I said, I hope this isn't just wishful thinking that something may materialize out of it, because some level of, but even if you look at World War II, as astounding as it may be to some people, there wasn't just, we know there was communication between the Nazi regime and the Western allies. There was also
Yeah.
communication at some level between the Nazi regime and Stalin's government.
Yeah.
On tier 2, tier 3 levels. There was still some
Yeah.
amount of
Yeah.
communications that was going back and forth. So it shouldn't be that shocking that something could be set up. The question is, how much willpower is there to do it? How much, uh, how much fear is there that something needs to be done otherwise than what
Well,
is
the
being done
question,
right now?
yes, the question is, what is the political impetus behind this? I mean, these tier 2 or tier 3 contacts, if they're to be significant, and if they are indeed taking place or in preparation, they have to be validated and approved from on high. And what you seem to be suggesting, or what Steve Jermy seems to be suggesting, is that this is the case. And of course, that, if it's true, that's what's very surprising, because on the contrary, we've seen Britain, the whole of Britain, not just the prime ministers who've come and gone, but the whole of Britain, the whole of the British deep state, taking the most hawkish line possible. And once again, we know that within Germany, there are elements that are not happy. There certainly are in France. In Britain, I really am unaware of who would be approving or initiating such contacts.
I can't say, and maybe this is
Yeah,
more wishful thinking than
yeah,
what reality is. But I think that's the only level that anything can be done at this point.
yeah, yeah,
Is
yeah,
on a low grade initial contact, because
yeah.
on high grades, like I said, there's no trust. There's absolutely no trust.
No, no.
And even if the British politicians are saying a lot of what they're saying for home consumption, home audience consumption, it's being heard and taken very seriously in Russia, in the halls of
Yeah,
power.
yeah,
So they may not even realize that really what they're doing, because they're playing games, internal games, but those internal games can come with very high external costs.
yeah. No, I mean, it could be. We'll definitely get ask Steve if he wants to come on the forum again, because you by telling me this, you've put a thought into my mind which had not occurred to me, and that is that with the new prime minister, who seems to me to be a bit of a sleazy populist, it could be, well, yeah, but I mean, it could be that they realize that the Ukraine war is very unpopular. There was a poll, or at least a map, So I can't tell you what the source of the percentages were. I can't tell you what the samples were. But there was a map published on X a couple of weeks ago which showed the percentage of people across Europe who disliked Putin. And to my astonishment, one of the lowest percentages was in Britain. I mean, it was 44%, whereas in France and Germany it was higher. And that really did surprise me because, of course, in the on the political level, Britain is the worst in that respect. But who knows? Maybe this new prime minister who's come in, I repeat, on a very populist ticket. He's talking about tackling the boats crossing the channel. He's talking about food prices. He's talking about energy costs and so on. A lot of very bread and butter issues. Who knows? Who knows? Maybe Steve and you are onto something. Again, it might be wishful thinking.
I'd hope so, because if you look at it realistically, from a geopolitical perspective, Russia and England are the two most logical allies in Europe. Both are on the either edge of Europe. Neither one of them is ever very fortunate when Europe unifies, because it's always against one or the other. And one's a sea power, or was a sea power, or could one day be again a sea power, and the other one's a land power. So you think they complement each other instead of being the bitterest of enemies. So somewhere the geopolitical logic really went off the rails. It still hasn't found its way back onto the rails.
Yeah. Well, listen, if what you say is true, if it turns out to be true, we'll come back to our viewers in a let's say a month, a week, a couple of weeks, a couple of months, and say you heard it here first. Stanislav Krapivnik.
I hope again.
Yeah. Stanislav, it's been.
I hope it's true. Yeah.
It's been exceptionally informative talking to you, and we're very grateful to you for coming onto the forum. Thank you very much for your time, and thanks to our viewers for watching, and see you again next week. All the best. Goodbye.